From high winds to driving rain, living on the Gulf Coast comes with the risk of tropical storms and hurricanes.
We never turn our back on a storm in the Gulf. They're tricky. Mother Nature doesn't always play by the rules, so we need to prepare as if that thing may shift at the last minute.
These storms shift, wobble, and change.
This is now, this is going to be tomorrow morning. This is tomorrow night. Could be anywhere within that cone. I wish I could tell you exactly where it's going to be.
These storms don't play, and whether we think we can beat Mother Nature or not, we're not ever going to beat Mother Nature.
But we can prepare, and there are steps we can take right now to protect our homes and families.
From NBC 15, this is STORMWATCH 2024, sponsored by Coastline Solutions and Big Fish Roofs and Restoration.
I'm WEAR News Chief Meteorologist Alan Strom. The 2024 hurricane season is here. WEAR News and NBC 15 News are partnering together to make sure you and your family are ready for whatever the season brings. Our area is no stranger to tropical systems, even powerful and deadly hurricanes. We've seen very active years and much quieter ones. But no matter what, the key is to be prepared for anything. 2023 was the fourth most active Atlantic hurricane season on record. There were 20 named storms, 7 of those became hurricanes, and 3 of those were major. Only one of those hurricanes hit the U.S., Hurricane Idalia, which went into Florida's Big Bend region as a Category 3 storm. According to NOAA, the 2023 season caused between $3 to $4 billion worth of damage across several states. That damage was largely centered around the Gulf Coast between Tallahassee and Tampa Bay. This year, forecasters say we can expect a more active than normal hurricane season.
And so, we are forecasting a very, very busy hurricane season in 2024.
An ominous warning as Colorado State's Dr. Phil Klotzbach issued his annual hurricane forecast for the year. Klotzbach and his team are forecasting 23 storms, 11 hurricanes with 5 of those being called major, rising to Category 3, 4, or 5 storms.
This is the highest April forecast that we put out. We started putting out these forecasts back in 1995.
The hurricane expert says this will be a classic La Niña season with above normal temperatures in the Atlantic, which could fuel storms.
From April through September, the model is forecasting a highly elevated amount of storms.
The hurricane experts said the data suggests there will be 9 named storms between April and September, with the busiest time frame coming after mid-August. Klotzbach says the warm waters of the Atlantic could mean a more active season for the East Coast, from Florida to Maine, with La Niña also possibly increasing activity in the Caribbean.
Obviously, Caribbean storms, what we really don't want, because obviously they either impact Caribbean, Central America, sometimes also get lifted up by troughs and start impacting in the U.S.
Aubrey Spears, back to you.
Colorado State University will update its forecast 3 more times this hurricane season based on new data it receives. Those updates will be in June, July, and August. Get yourself familiar with the meteorological acronym ENSO. It stands for El Niño Southern Oscillation. It's an important atmospheric ocean phenomenon to watch ahead of the Atlantic hurricane season. Meteorologist Joseph Neubauer tells us what ENSO means, what phase we might be in this season, and what it could mean for the upcoming hurricane season.
El Niño Southern Oscillation, or ENSO, is a mouthful, but in layman's terms it represents the fluctuation of sea surface temperature in the eastern Pacific. It also has 3 phases you've probably heard of: El Niño, La Niña, and ENSO neutral conditions.
El Niño refers to when the waters in the central and eastern tropical Pacific Ocean are warmer than average. And La Niña is the exact opposite, when those same waters in the central and eastern Pacific Ocean are cooler than average. When they're neither El Niño or La Niña, we call that ENSO neutral conditions.
When you warm or cool the waters in the eastern Pacific Ocean via El Niño or La Niña, the weather across all of the tropics can change drastically. This also includes where tropical cyclones can potentially form. Right now, the El Niño phase we've had for the last year is declining across the Pacific. So it begs the question, what's next for ENSO as we head into the Atlantic hurricane season?
We'll be transitioning into ENSO neutral conditions. Now, we're not expecting us to stay, or at least the Pacific Ocean, to stay in ENSO neutral for a very long period of time. We have La Niña conditions starting to develop, or favoring to develop, once we reach the summertime.
Tom, a climate scientist from NOAA, expects the development of La Niña through the months of July through September. That's peak hurricane season. And a La Niña weather pattern, on average, corresponds to more tropical cyclones in the Atlantic. This is because, as a weather pattern, La Niña limits wind shear in the Atlantic, wind shear being a common disruptor to the formation of tropical cyclones. The less wind shear you have, the more systems you can have too.
La Niña is basically leading to there being lower than average wind shear across the tropical Atlantic, generally leads to there being a more active hurricane season in that upcoming year in both the Atlantic and the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico as well.
We don't have to look back far to find a pair of recent La Niña Atlantic hurricane seasons either. 2020 was our busiest season on record, 2021 our third busiest. Both were La Niña years. And while it's not always helpful to forecast ahead by comparing directly to previous years, there are connections that can be made from years past to conclude that this upcoming year could be busy. On top of that, sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic basin have been record-breakingly warm month to month for the last 13 months. That's not good news. The warmer the sea surface temperature, the more likely those warm waters can intensify tropical cyclones. Just another factor to consider heading into the Atlantic hurricane season, according to NOAA.
Whether it's a busy La Niña year or the opposite with El Nino, it only takes one storm in your area for a hurricane season to be bad. Now is the time to start making preparations ahead of what could be a busy couple of months in the Atlantic basin. Lawmakers from both Florida and Alabama are keeping a close eye on the hurricane forecast. Representatives Matt Gaetz and Barry Moore spoke with us about the efforts underway at the federal level to make sure when storms hit, help arrives in a timely manner.
We know the damage that those storms do, Katrina obviously, and then some more recently, like you said, Hurricane Sally. So the federal government needs to be poised and positioned to help those people. We're looking at some opportunities to put some early response teams in place, as well as some resources for those teams.
Northwest Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz addressing high insurance premiums in Florida. According to CNN, some homeowners in the South are paying close to $5,000 a year for insurance. Gaetz says it's time to hold those companies accountable.
I also think we have to hold insurance companies accountable for these premium increases that we have been seeing. While insurance companies have been recording record profits nationwide, and while they've had very profitable lines in life insurance, health insurance, auto insurance in Florida, the property casualty market has been a wet blanket over our local economy. And so I actually think we need to hold hearings with the insurance executives to figure out how their rate filings comport with the reasonableness of what they're charging people.
In April, Florida approved 8 new insurance companies to enter Florida's insurance market. Each year, it's important to know if you live in an evacuation zone, an area prone to flooding, or in a mobile home or unsafe structure during hurricane season. These areas are most likely to be evacuated, and knowing your zone can help you heed the warnings from local officials. Depending on where you live, these evacuation zones are identified by letter or number, based on how high the water is likely to get during a storm. When evacuations are needed, they will be announced by zones. Each county has maps and, in some cases, evacuation routes. You can find links to those right now on our websites, weartv.com or mynbc15.com. Hurricane decals are available for residents of Orange Beach, Alabama. These stickers are good for 2 years and show proof of residency. You need this sticker if there's significant storm damage, and residents are the only ones allowed into restricted areas. This sticker shows officials you're allowed to come back in at the appropriate time. The city of Gulf Shores also has hurricane passes available, Santa Rosa Island as well. One danger associated with storms, rip currents. In fact, they're our #1 weather killer for this area. How to spot them and what you should do if you find yourself caught in one. They fly right into the center of a storm. For science, we go behind the scenes with the hurricane hunters.
You can take steps now to strengthen your home. Trim your trees on your property and remove dead ones. Repair loose gutters or siding. Think about having plywood, shutters, or hurricane guards to cover your windows and doors. Bring in all your outdoor patio furniture, toys, and trash cans.
STORMWATCH 2024, sponsored by Coastline Solutions and Big Fish Roofs and Restoration.
It wouldn't be hurricane season without the hurricane hunters. They risk their lives by flying into the eye of a storm to gather critical data for the National Hurricane Center in Miami. Meteorologist Kelly Foster caught up with the hurricane hunters as they gear up for the 2024 Atlantic hurricane season.
Over the years, we've become friends with the hurricane hunters in Biloxi, Mississippi, especially Sean Cross, who is now in his 24th season with the squadron. He told us he gets uneasy until that first flight of the season.
I've got my guard up on that first flight, but after we make one or two passes, everybody's right back in the saddle again.
Cross loves his job. He says there are 10 aircraft with 20 crews.
So we can fly 3 different storms at one time. We can actually have 3 aircraft in Hawaii flying a storm. We can have 3 aircraft in Biloxi flying a storm, and we can have 3 aircraft in St. Croix or on the East Coast. It depends.
These pilots fly in an alpha pattern, a series of left turns that helps the crew find the center of a storm. Interesting note, hurricane hunter planes are getting repainted back to its original color. It's a lighter gray, it's a slicker paint, which will be more fuel efficient for flights.
The Air Force made some changes to us. They said, no, we need everybody to look the same. We go on battleship gray. We fought it for a long time. We finally won that battle, and we're getting the old paint job back.
This year, the size of the dropson is smaller. The device still does the same function once it drops out of the plane. It takes a snapshot every 10 feet while capturing the temperature, pressure, winds, and humidity, and sends that information back to the aircraft.
With that information collected by the Aero Reconnaissance Weather Officer, we call them ARWO for short, they build what's called the vortex data message from this aircraft. They send it over satellite uplink to the National Hurricane Center in Miami, just like we've always done. And then from there, the forecasters in Miami create the predictions as far as the forecast models of where the storm is going to track.
Another vital component is the radar, located on the front of the plane. From a navigation standpoint, it acts like a GPS, helping the pilot break into the eye where he can make several passes, drop dropsons, and avoid the worst part of the storm.
Yeah, I've come back after flying through intense hail and things like that, where the paint is actually peeled back on the nose of the aircraft. It's almost like we're being sandblasted.
Another instrument outside the plane signals down to the water at the surface.
This whole pod is called a step frequency microwave radiometer. We call it SMRF for short. That white patch is basically putting a signal down to the surface, okay, and it's real time, it's bouncing back and forth. And what it's doing is it's measuring sea foam activity at the surface. By doing that, it can tell us exactly what the wind speed is at the surface.
These hurricane hunters risk their lives each time they fly out on a mission. Cross says the most harrowing flight of his career was Hurricane Michael.
I was on the landfall mission, and I'm telling you, I don't know, we didn't think for a second there if we were going to make it out. And it was a landfall mission. We broke out into the eye, and you could actually see the storm surge as it was pushing on land right there at Tyndall Air Force Base, knocking down the pine trees.
Cross also flew into Hurricane Katrina. He says while his crew risks their lives to collect data for the most accurate forecast, he says he takes it personally when people don't heed the warnings.
The number one cause of death in a hurricane is people drown because of the storm surge. And it's so important if you live in a low-lying area to listen to the experts in your area and evacuate if you're told to do so.
While the hurricane hunters are on standby, ready to fly into the eye of a storm, they want you on standby as well, with your hurricane plan in place, ready to evacuate if you are told to do so. By the way, the Hurricane Hunter Squadron in Biloxi is the only operational unit in the world that flies weather reconnaissance on a routine basis. And when pilots are on a mission, here's a look at that alpha pattern that they typically use when gathering information that could save your life. I'm meteorologist Kelly Foster. Back to you.
Tracking a storm's path and intensity, the trend of hurricanes getting more powerful and the destruction they can cause. But these storms don't grow in strength without fuel, the perfect conditions needed for hurricanes to form.
STORMWATCH 2024, sponsored by Coastline Solutions and Big Fish Roofs and Restoration.
The power of Mother Nature. The impacts of tropical systems are felt here along the Gulf Coast almost every year. The damage from these storms can be devastating. But how do these systems form? What fuels them? Meteorologist Brooke Richardson shows you the science behind tropical storms and hurricanes.
For hurricane formation, you need the exact right ingredients. So we're going to go walk you through what exactly goes into the formation of a hurricane. Now, it all starts off in the open Atlantic. We'll have unstable air. Temperatures will cool with height, and what that leads to is a rising motion. So we'll have that convection, that vertical motion, and that is going to produce some clouds. Now, under the right conditions, these clouds can turn into thunderstorms. If we have that warm water, as long as we have that vertical motion, we'll start to have those thunderstorms develop. Now, in order for this to happen, there must be moist layers at 15,000 feet. That is necessary, and that's going to be for continuous thunderstorm activity. And continuous is key because that is what is going to aid in the development of eventually an organized system that can eventually turn into a hurricane. Now, the velocity of the winds with this must not be able to change significantly with height. And what that means is you typically hear us talk about wind shear. That's a change in wind speed and direction as you go higher up in the atmosphere. If you have too much of that, that will shred apart these thunderstorms. Now, with light winds, that is going to help just gently steer this organized system, and also helping to fuel this is going to be the warm waters. As long as you have 80-degree temperatures in those waters, that is going to allow just continuous fuel pumping in to those thunderstorms. Now, as long as those ingredients are there, that's where you will see the possibility of a tropical depression forming. That's going to be organized clouds and thunderstorms. That light wind going to help to aid in a little bit of some circulation with those winds, but the winds are going to be less than 38 miles an hour. Now, as long as those conditions stay the same, it can continue to strengthen, and that's where we could have a tropical storm form. Still organized, strong thunderstorms, so they're getting a bit stronger. Circulation with winds 39 to 73 miles an hour. Now, as long as that continues to go into a favorable environment, that is when we will eventually get a hurricane, and that's when we have intense, organized tropical thunderstorms, very strong circulation. That's going to be aided by that light wind. Then we will have winds 74 miles an hour or more.
A common trend these last few years, tropical storms or low-end hurricanes are quickly strengthening into powerful major hurricanes. This isn't something we only see in the Atlantic Basin. In fact, last year, Hurricane Otis caused catastrophic damage when it made landfall over Acapulco, Mexico. But the storm that made landfall wasn't the one that people were preparing for. On a Monday night in October 2023, people in the beach town of Acapulco, Mexico, went to bed expecting a tropical storm to strike within 24 to 36 hours. What happened was incredible rapid intensification.
Rapid intensification is a small subset of storms that strengthen very quickly.
Hurricane Otis went well beyond what is measured to be rapid intensification.
Otis went from a tropical storm to a Cat 5 in just 12 hours, which is something that only a handful of storms have done around the world since records began in the 1960s.
Now, we do have a standard definition of what rapid intensification is, and that is strengthening of at least 35 miles an hour within a 24-hour period. So that's very strong.
Hurricane Otis was a direct hit for Acapulco. Winds at landfall 160 miles per hour.
Fue muy desastroso.
Mexico's president saying what Acapulco suffered was disastrous. The storm killed more than 50 people and caused $12 to $16 billion worth of damage. While Otis occurred in the eastern Pacific Basin, the same scenario is possible in the Atlantic Basin, which of course includes the Gulf of Mexico. The deadly force of a hurricane, the dangers you need to know to protect yourself and your family. Hurricanes can be hundreds of miles away and create deadly conditions along our shorelines. How you can spot a rip current.
Have a plan for if you stay or evacuate during a hurricane. Make sure you document and take pictures of your valuables well before the storm. Make sure your important documents like medical records, passports, and birth certificates are somewhere safe and where you can access them if needed.
STORMWATCH 2024, sponsored by Coastline Solutions and Big Fish Roofs and Restoration.
Rip currents, they're the #1 killer here on the Gulf Coast. Now, a day like today, things are nice and fairly calm, but we can have a tropical system way out over the Gulf, the sun can be shining here, and the rip currents are deadly. What they are and how to get out of a rip current, here's Joseph Neubauer.
Rain or shine, anytime a tropical cyclone is in the Gulf of Mexico, our chance for a rip current here across the Gulf Coast and across northwest Florida goes up. And yes, a tropical cyclone can pass hundreds of miles to our south, and that can still have an impact on our marine and beach conditions, because when a system passes to the south, wind is typically out of the south, and we see lots of wind pile up the water right along our stretch of the coast, and all that excess water, courtesy of that southerly flow, gets trapped between our sandbars. That builds in a deep current of water. All this excess water has nowhere to go but out through that current between these bars, and that's how a rip current forms, and that's how that danger zone forms along our stretch of the coastline. If you find yourself in a rip current, you can try swimming parallel to the coastline, but if that's not an option, try and tread water and wait for somebody to get in there and get you out, like one of our wonderful lifeguards there at Pensacola Beach. But one of the easier ways to keep yourself safe from rip currents is just knowing the flag system, like the double red flag for hazardous conditions and even single red flags. Both can mean the Gulf of Mexico is closed to swimming. If you're watching and you're a local from southwest Alabama and northwest Florida, you know what the flags are. You even know that yellow flags can pose potentially some hazardous conditions to swimming. It's the out-of-towners that we need to speak up for. So if you see someone out on a red flag or double red flag day, always speak up. You can help save a life. Of course, we want people to enjoy our beautiful beaches safely here across northwest Florida and southwest Alabama.
The time to protect your family is now, before a hurricane strikes. It's never too early to stock up on water, non-perishable food, pet food, battery, flashlights, first aid kits, medications, baby supplies, and personal hygiene items. Make sure your car is fueled up and you have extra gas on hand for generators or for your car. Also, make sure you have a weather radio. The key, don't wait until it's too late. It's much safer if you plan ahead so you're ready to respond if a storm threatens the Gulf Coast. Now, of course, there are many more items you and your family may need. We have a checklist for you on our websites, WEARTV.com and MyNBC15.com. We don't know what 2024 will bring, but together we can be prepared and take steps to protect your family, home, and property. You can count on us to keep you informed with up-to-the-minute updates. Download our weather app for updates delivered right to your mobile phone or tablet. Follow us on social media. Our forecasts are posted daily on WEARTV.com and MyNBC15.com. And watch us right here for the latest on any weather system impacting our area. When severe weather strikes, we'll get you through it. We'll get through it together. I'm Chief Meteorologist Alan Strum. Thank you for joining us for Stormwatch 2024.